Good morning, brothers and sisters. My warmest welcome to our podcast, Creativity and Crisis. My name is Dr. Glenn T. Martin. For a number of years, I've been president of the World Constitution and Parliament Association, an organization working to address our planetary crises and to establish an enduring and liberating human future. I'm also a philosopher by profession who loves thinking and creative vision and inspiring ideas. My newest book is called Designed for a Living Planet, the Earth Constitution Solution. In these podcasts, I engage in dialogue with prominent thinkers, scholars, and activists who are similarly concerned about the multitude of crises confronting humanity. Are there creative and practical solutions, and how can these solutions be achieved? I hope our listeners will both stay with us and join us in the thought processes that have become an utterly necessary part of our quest to create a decent planetary civilization for everyone. My guest today is Fritz Pointer. Fritz has a BA in English from Creighton University, an MA in African Studies from UCLA, and an MA in African Languages and Literature from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Fritz has published 2 books, A Passion to Liberate, Ghana's South Africa, Images of District, and an African oral epic poetry praising the deeds of a mythic hero, which came out in 2013. He is currently the Vice President of the Democratic World Federalists of San Francisco. Welcome, Fritz. It's great to have you with us. The world is divided into these sovereign nation states that are worried about one another, that see the danger of invasion and power struggles and power politics and so on. How would you address that?
Glenn, this is very complex because I was just thinking about this and doing some writing about it the other day with regard to that. And I recognize, for example, China is a huge, billion people or whatever.
Right.
But they have a single leader, Xi Jinping, I think his name
Right.
is. You have India, similarly, billion people, one leader, Narendra Modi. You've got, Japan, but Africa, you've got 50 African heads of state. And
Yeah.
there's something illogical. There's something that and I can understand how this can be used and manipulated because there is no one voice speaking for Africa. And that's the problem, a major problem. And I don't know if it's, under the COINTELPRO procedures back in the day, they said we want to prevent the rise of a national leader. Well, I wonder if that same philosophy applies to Africa. We want to prevent the rise of a continental leader, a Gaddafi, or a Sankara, or a Lumumba, or an Nkrumah. And so you have these 50 African heads of state working at the AU, the African Union, who come to the United Nations with say a population that's not as large as California, or this is 10 million people or 12 million, and yet want the same power or weight or consideration of India or China. And this to me is something I don't know if this could ever be worked out. And this baffles me. It really does. I'm baffled by this, and it's been talked about and broached by leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, who wrote about it and talked about the need to give up that sovereignty or some of that sovereignty for the sake of unity. And I think that direction is the direction that will bring about the most, I think, progressive results. That is, if they are willing to say, hey, I'm willing to give up some of our country, to give up some of its sovereignty for the sake of continental unity, and then beyond that, for the sake of global unity, And I think, yes.
How would this global unity be achieved? Would it be under the United Nations?
Well, under a new United Nations, I mean, I think we have to really revise and, reform the United Nations in terms of this P5 veto power. Just reading that, again, the P5 are the only ones who have ignored and simply, simply ignored the new nuclear non-proliferation treaty. That all the other countries said we want to enforce this particular treaty. And the P5 said, no, in other words, the nuclear armed nations said, we want to keep our nuclear weapons.
That's right. That's right.
And so that to me is certainly, and I think to many others, is problematic. And sovereignty has a lot to do with that. The idea that we can do whatever we want for the benefit of our nation, in spite of what happens to others. And that same thinking is affecting the pandemic right now with the COVID-19.
If within so-called democracies, I don't know if you could call the U.S. something like that or not, but some, the idea is that the people govern, right? And the people have a voice, and they do elect leaders, right? They elect local leaders and state leaders and national leaders and so on. But it was a direct participation of the people, right? But the UN, Fritz, you're talking about a reformed UN, but it sounds to me like, say, the Africans were willing to have a unity among the 50 different nations and so on, and therefore it had a large voice in the UN. It
Mhm.
would still be a
Mhm.
a territorial entity. It would be the African voice
Mhm.
versus the European voice versus the Asian voice. And it seems to me that even though that would certainly give the black people of the world a bigger voice, because Africa is largely black people, it
Mhm.
would still result in a struggle for power, a struggle for voice, and so
Mhm.
on.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and and within democracies, there's the idea of one person, one vote,
Mhm.
right? So that people themselves are participate in the choosing of the leaders and the governing of them. Could we have something like that for the world, right? Instead of the people of Africa giving up sovereignty for a larger voice, could you have the people of Africa having each one a vote, right? And create a new UN, as you put it, with the real representation of people directly, rather than through via some national group or something like that.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think you're absolutely correct in that, Glenn. That we, that could be and it should be the direction that we want to go. It seems to me that that there be, a different kind of governing structure. That there be a
Uh-huh.
different
Uh-huh.
kind of governing structure for the globe, for the world, and that as we look to the future, we bring with us what's relevant and worthwhile. I believe in not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I
Mhm.
think the UN and the League of Nations and that the inception of those entities is a very positive beginning. But it's just that. It's just like the American Constitution. It was just the beginning of the creation of a kind of law-based, legal-based system. But it shouldn't stop there. It can't stop there. It's got to go beyond just. I mean, in other words, the Constitution of the United States, like the Earth Constitution, I think should be a living document that allows
Yeah.
for the evolution of human beings and human thought.
Yeah.
And human
Yeah.
thought. We don't think the way we thought back in the day. That as
Absolutely.
people
Right.
are being educated and being able to appreciate the histories, the cultures, the civilizations of others, that indeed, we can evolve and develop a
Right. Right.
consciousness that rises above just the personal, the individual, the sovereign, and recognizes that in any relationship, in order for it to work, we have to give up some of our sovereignty. I know that's what it is with me and my wife.
Right. Right. Me too. uh, the the Constitution for the Federation of Earth,
Yes.
under Article 18, is a
Yeah.
very open document in that respect. It allows for changes to come
Yeah.
about. It
Yeah.
even mandates changes within 10 years of the initiation of the World Parliament. it's required to review the whole Constitution, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I think that kind of evolving living document
Mhm.
is a very good idea. But to contrast that with the UN system, the UN has never had direct representation of people, right? It's always been a General Assembly which represents each nation. There's
Mhm.
never any dream of people electing representatives to go to the UN. And right now there's a movement called the Movement for the UN Parliament, the UNP, which wants to create a parliament in the UN that complements the General Assemblies. It would be kind of like the Senate and the House in the United States. The House is a direct representation of people, and the Senate is a representation of the states. And
Mhm.
so the
Mhm.
General Assembly would be the states, and the UNP would be the people. The only thing is, as you're saying correctly, right, that neither of these would have any power under the current UN system,
Right.
right? As long as you have the Security Council that has the veto and all the power, you're just adding a powerless elected body to a powerless national.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's why the Earth Constitution, as you know, is what I recommend. In fact, my new
Mhm.
book is called Designed for a Living Planet: The Earth Constitution Solution.
Yes.
And it has not only direct representation of people as individuals, as voting individuals, but it has the House of Nations, allowing the nations to actually have a voice and a vote, which the UN General Assembly does not have now.
Right. Right. I see. Yeah. My beginnings would be, Glenn, looking at education. I'm an educator. I've taught for over 30 years, and I know the value, and as I know you do, of education and learning, and that so many, so many people are left out of that system, that is, who don't have an opportunity to get higher education, if you will. But even at the secondary school level, Glenn, I think our teachers need to be, versed in and educated in a global perspective. They need to really have a sense of the contributions of the world and be able to appreciate those and teach them with honesty and integrity and discipline. In other words, they don't have to be an expert on all the areas of the world, but they could at least have an appreciation for the contributions of people throughout the world. And every time that happens, it's being fought against, even here in California now. The idea of an ethnic studies curriculum, for example.
Hmm.
Uh, the keeping want to keep with the same tried and kind of established history and civilization studies, and I think that's so problematic. I mean, as we think about, I'm just learning about the Aztecs and the Incas and the like. And so, and I know that there are systems throughout the world. But anyway, what I'm saying, I think, is that our teachers need a broader perspective. Our teachers need to be appreciative of the diverse contributions of the world and be able to articulate those, be able to promulgate those in ways that are effective. That's what I
Yeah.
truly believe.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it begins for me. We used to ask, what have you done? Why should we respect you? What have you done as a people that we should respect you? In other words, you're just being a human being is not enough. What have you accomplished? You
Uh,
know,
uh,
what works of art, what works of literature, what works of technology and innovation have you contributed to humankind? Not as a person, but just as a people, necessarily. But and that is not recognized, and I think that's the beginning of the problem. I think, Glenn, in the home and in the
well,
schools.
yeah. If nations give up this claim to sovereignty that
Yeah,
separates them so seriously,
yeah.
what you're saying about education, which I think is excellent, it would have to be global in some way, right? It couldn't be just in one country, right?
Exactly,
And
exactly.
so I'm wondering if you have entertained ideas about a kind of progressive transformation of human consciousness or a globalized consciousness. Sometimes people speak today about planetary consciousness and so on. Do those things resonance with your thought?
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And that's why, I'm so grateful for even discovering these ideas, Glenn. These are ideas that were new to me, even after graduate school. No one ever told me about this level or way of thinking,
Yeah.
global governance and Earth Federation. And I think we need to find ways of getting this into the consciousness of the next generation in the most effective and deliberate way we can, because they have to come find a way to break out of this myopism and notion of sovereignty that we have been imbued with. And I think it would be to the global advantage that we and the educators globally, broach this in a similar way.
Yeah.
So yes, indeed, I think we need to advance that idea of a global consciousness. Indeed, that we're global citizens.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yes. And what you were saying before about nations being willing to give up some of their sovereignty, if nations, if we have a federation of some sort for the planet, and nations become like states within the United States, part of a federal order of things, that in itself, and this is what I'm wondering, it would seem would help activate this global kind of consciousness, because sovereignty, it seems, is this sense of absolute borders, absolute difference, absolute, recognizing no solidarity above myself, common
Yes.
human solidarity, whatever. And it seems to me that that might be actually deleterious to the expansion of consciousness. So if
Uh,
we got rid of sovereignty, consciousness might expand rapidly.
Most
But
definitely. I think you're right, Glenn. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. That idea is so pernicious. The idea that this is mine, the ownership notion. In fact, ownership itself is, in a way, somewhat problematic. I think the Buddhists take the position that all ownership is an illusion. That and that's where the capitalists come in. That sees things through the prism of ownership. I mean, life, liberty, and a pursuit of property was the way Locke had
right, that's right.
it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
somehow that got transformed by our friend Jefferson into life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Right,
So we have happiness and property somehow synonymous in a way, but yes,
right.
life, liberty, but that is a certain, I don't know, what would you call that? A certain cultural view, because I don't know if all people see it that way. I
Yeah.
mean, life, liberty, and the pursuit
But
of property.
so, in the I mentioned before, I'm teaching philosophy of law right now, and there's a lot of discussion of that in the literature on philosophy of law, because the so-called democratic liberal view is that each of us has a right to pursue happiness in our own way, as long as we don't interfere with others and so on. And part of that, what protects that pursuit of happiness and keeps the government from interfering with that pursuit, is our right to private property, right? So the government, for example, cannot come into your house without a warrant and so on. They just can't, the authorities that we have above us, the police, they're just not empowered to indiscriminately
Hmm.
do things to us, even though it sometimes happens,
Hmm.
and there's a lot of talk in the literature about property being personal property, especially being connected with that. My house, my
Yes, yes.
welfare, and so on. Would you say that that needs to be re-examined, or?
Of course, of course. I know, well, not know, but I've somewhat the Chinese system seems to operate on. You cannot own the land, but you can own the structures above the land. You cannot, the land belongs to the people, and
Yeah,
so I
interesting.
think there are other new ways to think about this, and new ways to think about the idea of private property and private ownership. And I don't have answers there. I need to do some more thinking and reading in that regard myself, Glenn. As Murthy would say, he's an accountant. Well, I'm an English teacher, so so,
Yeah,
so but these are ideas I think most definitely that we should engage. We should we should investigate,
Yeah,
and we should do new thinking about, because
yeah,
it is such a problematic idea. Again, with the idea of Citizens United, I think it was the notion of corporations being people again. We're back to that. Private property, in other words, private property. You can be my private property. There's
right.
another, and then which got to Americans, right? And when I give up my private property, I want to be compensated for
Yeah,
that. And that's what
yeah,
we got into with that Civil War. That you took my property, and my
yeah,
property is a human being.
right.
These things become significantly problematic when we're thinking along those lines, that
Yeah,
I can own you. And the notion of freedom and what it means, I think, has a lot to do with some of the problems we're having now in this pandemic, and why Americans are suffering so terribly with this notion. I'm free. The
right,
government can't tell me to wear a mask. They can't
right.
tell me to socially distance. They can't tell, and yet we don't want to be authoritarian. We don't want to be
Yeah,
like the Chinese. And so, hey, what does that leave us? I mean, it's kind of like back to I'd rather be dead than red.
yeah, yeah,
I'd rather be dead than red. But
yeah,
I think that, if we monolithic thinking, singular thinking, myopism is a problem that we have to be, I think, open to all of these ideas, Glenn. That just because it's an idea that comes out of the East, or an idea that comes out of the West, or an idea that comes out of the South, or communism, whatever, that it's a human idea.
yeah,
Why do we reject an idea from another human being simply because it's from another culture?
yeah,
I, that still baffles me. I mean,
yeah.
if it's a good idea, I
Sure.
mean, socialism is bad in America as long as it, is bad in America if it's shared among the total population. That
Yeah,
that socialism is okay as long as it's giving me what I want as a white American. But when you start talking about socialism as being,
for everybody.
diffused among everybody, then no, I'm not for socialism.
Yeah,
So I do
yeah,
think there's something. I think socialism is what I know about it. I don't know a lot about it, but what I do know about it, it seems that we can. I don't mind borrowing ideas that work from other cultures.
sure,
And
sure.
that's what I think.
I think there's an excellent uh, writer on socialism. I'm sure you're familiar with his name, Michael Harrington,
No, I'm
who,
not.
well,
Hmm.
he died young, which was a shame. But in the 70s, he wrote a well-known book called Poverty in America,
Oh, mhm.
and he was a democratic socialist, and
Oh,
he's got a really excellent book out called Socialism Past and Future, um,
okay.
and of course his socialism is a democratic socialism, which means it's a market socialism. The government doesn't own everything, but
Mhm,
there are limits, and I think this is the kind of thing you're pointing out, Fritz. And
mhm.
and along those same lines, I wanted to mention a couple of things the Provisional World Parliament has done. One, they have one bill which has abolished corporate personhood. It's called the Corporate Personhood Abolition Act,
Okay. Work.
and so they see that same problem that you're talking about. This idea that corporations have the same rights as people
Yeah.
is absurd.
Isn't
And but another thing they have done in their Economic Act, the Provisional World Parliament has set a ratio. First of all, under the Earth Constitution, there's no extreme poverty, right? So the poorest person is able to do okay, do well, right? And so what the Parliament did was set a ratio between the poorest and the richest. In other words, how many times the wealth of that ordinary person is how many times that wealth is acceptable for the richest, right? And people have proposed things like that before. In the case of the parliament, that is quite extreme. Their view was quite extreme. They said it should only be 1 to 4.
mm,
Right?
mhm.
1 to 4. The richest person should only have 4 times what the what the poorest has. But as you know, the billionaires of the world have hundreds and hundreds of times what the
Yes,
poorest
yes,
people have. And the poorest people have nothing at all. They can't even survive, a billion people like that on the planet.
yes, yes, yeah,
These kind of things that you and I are talking about seem to be, extremely fundamental to rethink our relationship with one another, our economic relationships with one another,
that's
and
right.
our legal
Yeah,
relationships in terms of a world. What
yeah.
kind of world system do we want to live within?
And exactly, exactly. I certainly agree, Glenn. That's certainly very important that we think in terms of a different kind of world order in terms of distribution of wealth. I just read where there are 55 top major corporations in America that paid zero in taxes,
My goodness.
from Nike to whoever, but 55 of them. I've even heard Arundhati Roy say, "What should you do about those people who don't want to pay taxes?" She said, "Take it,
Yeah, yeah,
take the money, take it
yeah.
from them, take it from them." I mean, come on. I
Has
mean,
to be done by law, of course.
yeah, by
Taken by
law,
law.
yeah, you find a way to make them pay. It's just absurd that
Right.
Bezos and Zuckerberg and these people find ways not to pay taxes, but yet they're benefiting from the taxes paid by others on the roads, whatever, lights, technology, whatever.
Absolutely. Right. They benefit from society
Yes,
as a whole and its legal
uh-huh,
order and the rest of it,
that's right.
and yet
That's
they
right.
don't give nothing back. They don't give
Yeah,
anything back.
and that's a challenge, isn't it, Glenn? How do we get to that point where we can make them pay
Well, I think we have,
legally?
in my personal view, we have to have an authority, a world authority in place that's higher than the corporations and higher than the nations. Because what the rich have done, the top 10% of Americans own 95% of the wealth in this country, right? 95%.
95%. Yeah.
So what they've done with that wealth, as you and I know, is they own the media. They own NBC, CBS, ABC. It's not just Fox News. They own it all. They own the movie making industry. They own the hotels. They own the Congress, most of the congressmen, right?
Yeah.
They own the senators, and so under that system, how are we going to create a just and a redistributed world system that works for everybody? We have to have an authority above them. It has to be a world authority.
Yes, it
They've
has to.
done, they've done this not only with the United States, but probably with every country around the world,
Yes,
the
yes.
rich, the oligarchs in Russia, and so on.
That's right. And
So,
that fear that you mentioned even earlier, I think, I don't know if it was doing it earlier, but about centralized authority, that's something that people are very much concerned about when they talk about global governance and world law. Will it be one? Because that's America almost sees itself in some senses as being that authority.
right,
We
right,
are the global policeman. We are the global authority, and our system should be imposed, if not accepted, by all countries of the world. And if not, we will make sure that you don't work
right,
because we don't want to have anything that's competitive with what we're doing, what we're saying. And I think it's still to protect and to defend a kind of racial oligarchy. I really do. I
yeah,
mean, there are a few black, billionaires, the Oprahs and the Jay Z's who get a chance to participate, but not in terms of the ownership of global manufacturing
right,
and
right,
production. I mean, they play their basketball and sing their songs, but they're not controlling much in
mm,
terms of the
mm,
economy. So, we need something that, I mean, a system, you say, a global system that demands that people pay their fair share.
yeah, yeah,
They pay their fair share. We're not saying go broke. We're saying pay your fair share. And there must be examples of this throughout, in different parts of the world where
yeah,
people where the governments have said, no, you've got to pay more.
yeah.
I don't know.
I think our time is about up, Fritz.
Oh no!
Yeah. In fact, we could
Thank
go
you.
on. I know. I'd
I
love to.
know, Glenn.
Anyway, I want to thank you so much, Fritz
I
Pointer,
want to thank
for
you for your
participating.
work, Glenn. Thank you so very much for your work. I appreciate you, man.
Well, thank you, Fritz. Yeah,
Thank you so
and I
much.
appreciate you. And so, thank you for thinking creatively with me today about establishing a living future for the earth and future generations.
Yes, indeed. And when will I be able to get a copy of that book? I looked on Amazon already. It's not there yet, is it?
You email me your address, and I'll send you a copy.
I'll email you my address. Yes, I will.
To our listeners, I hope you have enjoyed today's dialogue about establishing a living future for the earth and for all future generations. Our podcast has been recorded, and the link will be streamed to multiple social media outlets and posted on my own website at oneworldrenaissance.com. I would love to hear your thoughts and reactions to this exciting conversation. You can email me at gmartin@earthconstitution.world. This podcast has been made in association with Everscope Multimedia. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week, and that you will join us in Creativity and Crisis at the same time and place next week. Goodbye for now, be well, and God bless.